Welcome to Chapter 11 of Traditions and Encounters, where in this video we're going to talk about Mediterranean society, the Roman phase. So this chapter really aims to talk about the city of Rome from the time it was a kingdom to its time as a republic and onwards. So Rome was founded by these people named Etruscans, and legend has it that two brothers named Romulus and Remus were rescued by a she-wolf and eventually became powerful enough that they founded the city of Rome in 753 BCE. So the people who dominated Italy at this time were called the Etruscans, so that's an important term to remember. And they basically just ruled all of Italy, and that of course included Rome, because Rome is in Italy. Eventually though, the Roman Republic and its constitution was formed from this Etruscan government. Basically what happened was that the Rome nobility, so the powerful and the wealthy of Rome, deposed the last Etruscan king in 509 BCE because they didn't like the stuff the king was doing, and they instituted sort of a more democratic government. Now, this government included a constitution and provided for two positions called consuls, and these consuls included one civil leader and one military leader. And these consuls were elected by an assembly dominated by the patricians, and the patricians were the nobility, so they were the wealthier off of the people in Rome. And also included was a senate, and this senate included more people, more patricians, and these basically advised the consuls and helped ratify the major decisions, so sort of like the legislature. And both the senate and the consuls represented the interests of the patricians, so essentially only the wealthy people had their ideas represented. Eventually this gave way to conflicts, so the patricians really fought with the plebeians, who were also fairly well off, but they weren't as powerful as the patricians. And so to make the plebeians happy, the patricians decided to grant some power to the plebeians through tribunes. And the tribunes were also like people in the Senate, but they didn't have as much power. But these people could intervene and veto certain decisions that the patricians had thought up. So the plebeians really dominated Roman politics up until the 3rd century BCE. Eventually, Rome got pretty powerful, so they decided to expand. Rome consolidated its position in the center of the Mediterranean, and they also fought wars, one of which was the conflict with Carthage called the Punic Wars, which, of course, Carthage was this colony of the Phoenician Empire at the time, and it was located in modern-day Tunisia. So this conflict with Carthage really helped solidify Rome's position in the Mediterranean Sea, and it really gave more power to Rome. Soon after this war, Rome became the preeminent power in eastern and the western Mediterranean, and no other empire really started to match up. So soon after this war was the foundation of an empire. There was this guy named Julius Caesar. I think all of us know him pretty well, and he was this very popular social reformer and conqueror, and specifically he conquered Gaul. And what happened was he seized Rome in 49 BCE and claimed the title dictator for life. So he was sort of going back on the democratic ideals that Rome had at this time. Basically, he implemented social reforms so more people would be equal. And he also centralized control, so Rome would have more power. But unfortunately, he was assassinated in 44 BCE by supposedly one of his advisors or friends named Brutus, and we all know that pretty horrible story. So after Julius Caesar came this dude named Octavian. Octavian really helped bring the civil conflict to an end that had happened after Julius Caesar. And because he helped to bring all the civil conflict to an end, the Senate really liked him and bestowed him the title of Augustus. And this is where we get the name Augustus Caesar. So Octavian is really just Augustus Caesar. Under Octavian's rule, he disguised his monarchy as a republic, but he also created a new standing army to control his policy, to help regulate his policies, and he implemented imperial institutions that really took root and started to make Rome all the more powerful. So under Octavian, there was continuing expansion and integration, so the Romans, they expanded into the Mediterranean basin, Western Europe, and even down to Egypt in the Nile and Kush. Through this time, there was this very important term known as Pax Romana, and basically what Pax Romana is is just Roman peace. For 2.5 centuries, there was not much fighting or war going on in Rome, and everybody was just doing great. Like, the economy was doing great. There really wasn't much problems in Rome at this time. And through this time, we see a lot of the great engineering marvels that we associate with Rome, so like the postal system, and we also see their great laws, such as traditions of 12 tables. Really, just all the great things we associate with Rome came during Octavian's rule and Pax Romana. So what was economy and society like in the Roman Mediterranean? Well, really, it was pretty heavily centered on trade and urbanization. So there were owners of latifundia, which were basically huge plantations. That's an important word to know. You should definitely know it. And basically, these huge plantations focused on specialized production of crops for export. Of course, they were in the Mediterranean, so there was always a big market. And even more important was their trade. So they had sea lanes that linked ports in the Mediterranean, and the Roman Navy helped regulate this trade and keep out pirates. And eventually, the Mediterranean sort of became like a lake for the Romans. It was like the Romans' playground. They did all their stuff in it. So the city of Rome, it really started developing with all this funding and money coming in, that they were able to develop urbanly, as we talked before. So statues, pools, fountains, engineering marvels like arches, temples, stadiums, such as the famous Colosseum that you might know. These all developed in Rome at this time. They were also in the front of innovation by using concrete, and there were just tons of attractions around the city of Rome. So like baths, pools, gyms, a lot of the crazy stuff that you wouldn't expect in this time actually occurred in Rome. So family and society, of course, it was like patriarchy, like all the other places around the world at this time. There were paterfamilias, another important word. And this was basically where the eldest male of the family ruled. So this could be the father, the youngest son, or it could be like the great-grandfather, whoever was the oldest male that ruled. But women were also important because they had considerable influence in their families, and many times they helped supervise the business or wealthy estates. And you really start to see this social stratification in Rome. There were really wealthy who were always partying. Then there were poor people who were just trying to survive. And then slavery even was a big part. You had 1/3 of the population, and at times slave uprisings occurred. So Cosmopolitan Mediterranean, it really included the Roman deities and really just the social culture of Rome at this time. So they believed in gods, goddesses, and household gods. And the Greeks also influenced Stoicism. So like Aristotle, Socrates, they were really like serious thinkers. They really appealed to the Roman intellectuals. You see Greek and Roman really start to mix in at this time. Also, the Roman roads that were really well built, they were highways for religious belief spreading, so that was a big deal. But the most important thing that comes out of this time is really Judaism and early Christianity. So there was Jesus, and Jesus was basically this charismatic Jewish leader who was the savior for people from God. And he basically attracted large crowds through his wisdom and miraculous powers. But eventually the Romans thought he was taking too much power away from their government, so they crucified him early in 30 CE. So actually we talk so much about BCE, CE, that's before Common Era or Common Era. Common Era and before Common Era, it's actually split at the time of Jesus. So this is why Jesus is sort of important to world history. Eventually, the Christians, they wrote a New Testament, which tacked on to the Old Testament of Judaism. So the Torah was really just the Old Testament. And together, this became the holy book of Christianity, the Bible. And right after Jesus was gone, there was this man, Paul of Tarsus, and he was this principal figure in the spread of Christianity. Many people regard him as the first pope, and he really just helped spread Christianity a lot. And as we know, Christianity really appealed to the lower classes and the urban population and women who didn't really have power in the current Roman system and religions. So that was one reason it spread, and it really just went everywhere in the Mediterranean and around the world. Ultimately, though, we remember that Christianity also syncretized a lot with the Roman pagan traditions from Old World encounters, and that probably also contributed to the spread and rise and adoption of Christianity that we'll see soon after. So this has been Chapter 11, Mediterranean Society, the Roman Phase, basically talking about Rome and all its great accomplishments. Thanks so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.